Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our live coverage. We are following a critical juncture in the standoff between Washington and Tehran. The 60-day negotiating window that both sides agreed to in mid-June expired on August 17th without a deal, and President Trump says no talks are currently scheduled with Iran. At the same time, the U.S. president is threatening what he calls an economic D-Day against Tehran, even as regional mediators, chiefly Oman and Pakistan, continue trying to revive the process. The Strait of Hormuz remains the flashpoint at the center of it all. Shipping traffic throughout the waterway is still muted. Global oil prices are climbing, and Washington says it now controls the strait, a claim Tehran disputes. We'll also be joined with Dr. Nabil Mikhail, professor at George University in Washington, as well as Mr. Nader Rong, a political and economic analyst from China, via Zoom call for an in-depth conversation. But for now, let's begin with a closer look at how the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz continues to ripple across global markets.
Shipping costs across the world's key trade corridors have surged over the past months, driven by fallout from the war in Iran and the worsening drought crisis linked to climate change. The Strait of Hormuz, which once carried 20% of the world's crude oil, refined products, and liquefied natural gas, has seen vessels' traffic collapse. Iran's Supreme National Security Council says the waterway will not reopen until the United States, quote, corrects its behavior. According to Argus, the agency that tracks freight prices, the cost of shipping oil from the Gulf to Asia hit $15.22 a barrel on August the 10th, the highest level since records began in 2005. That spike follows threats from Houthi militias in Yemen to target oil tankers crossing the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The pressure isn't limited to the Middle East. In Panama, ships are now awaiting the average of 10 days to cross the canal, with transit fees reaching up to $2.5 million per vessel. The Financial Times reports one container ship paid nearly $4 million just to skip the queue. In Germany, the Rhine River has dropped to its lowest level in nearly 150 years, threatening a key artery for Europe's largest economy. Economists at the Kiel Institute warn the drought could shave up to 0.2% of Germany GDP this quarter. Meanwhile, insurance costs on affected shipping routes have roughly tripled, according to industry sources, and the ripple effect are spreading from fertilizers and grain shipments to auto parts to the chemicals used in electronic manufacturing. Analysts warn on their part that combined squeeze on Hormuz, Panama, and the Red Sea is now feeding a broader wave of inflation set to reach consumers worldwide.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring in Mr. Nader Rong, a political and economic analyst and a member of the Board of Chinese Association for Middle East Studies. Welcome to the program, Mr. Nader.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, as we all know, the United States appears ready to expand economic pressure beyond Iran itself to countries that continue trading with Tehran. How significant is this for China, given its role as the largest buyer of Iranian oil?
China always say that sanctions, stated that sanctions and the pressure tactics do no help in resolving issues, and this will only lead to escalation that serves no one's interest. And China calls on parties to act with restraint and avoid taking any measure that may further escalate tensions or deal another blow to global economic growth and financial stability. And all the parties should return to the right track of political settlements through dialogue and then negotiations at an early date. And China has always closely watched relevant developments and do it is necessary to protect our legitimate rights and interests.
Now, if Washington enforces secondary sanctions on Chinese companies or financial institutions, how do you expect Beijing to respond? Could this become another front in U.S.-China strategic competition?
As we always say that the cooperation between China and Iran has always been conducted with the framework of international law and should not be interfered or disrupt. And China will take all necessary measures to firmly safeguard our own rights and interests. And China has reaffirmed that it opposes all the unilateral sanctions that have no basis in international law and are not authorized by the UN Security Council. So China has ordered its companies to not comply with the U.S. sanctions and refuse to implementing all the sanctions imposed by the United States. And also, I think if there are new sanctions that is imposed on the Chinese banks and other state-owned enterprises, China will also use its countermeasures as it used in the trade war last year with the United States. I think it will include the rare earth restriction also. And so that these sanctions and the tensions between China and the United States also will not benefit any part of the two countries, and also it will lead harmful results for the international community.
Since China has consistently argued that sanctions are not the solution to the Iranian nuclear issue, does Beijing have a realistic diplomatic alternative, or is it primarily trying to protect its own economic interests? Mr. Rong, can you hear me?
Of course, China has a diplomatic. Yes, I can hear you. Of course, China has a diplomatic alternative, which was proposed by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, which the proposals include 4 points in order to restore the peace and stability in the Gulf region and Middle East. Firstly, uphold the principle of peaceful coexistence and support regional countries in improving mutual relationship and promoting the building of a common and comprehensive and cooperative and sustainable regional security architecture. And secondly, uphold the principle of national sovereignty and also respect the sovereignty and security and territorial integrity for all the regional countries, and protect the safety of all personnel and facilities in the country, in the region. And thirdly, uphold the principle of international rule of law and safeguard the UN-centered international system and also international order based on the international law. And the last point is that uphold the principle of integrating development and security and foster a favorable environment for the development of regional countries and share the opportunities of Chinese style modernization. So the China's aim is to push all the countries to realize the peaceful coexistence and to concentrate on national development and to give up the war and confrontations with military means.
Speaking of peaceful coexistence and moving on to GCC-China relations, the Gulf supplies a substantial share of China's energy imports. Now, could tougher U.S. sanctions and renewed tensions around Iran force Beijing to deepen its political and security engagement in the Gulf?
Yes, of course. China, for decades, China has been the largest quote trade partner for the.
Dear viewers, we will be taking a quick short break and we will be back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still joined via Zoom call with Mr. Nadir Rong, a political and economic analyst and member of the board of the Chinese Association of Middle East Studies. Mr. Nadir, I'm going to repeat the question if it wasn't clear at the first time. Now, the Gulf supplies a substantial share of China's energy imports. Could tougher U.S. sanctions and renewed tension around Iran force Beijing to deepen its political and security engagement in the Gulf?
Decades, China has been always been the largest trade partner for all the countries in this region, especially with the Gulf countries. And China's role is a mediator and to realize the peace and the stability in this region. And also, China will play a more positive role in the security cooperation with these countries, despite involving directly with the conflicts in this region, and also China will always be a contributor for the national development for these countries, as we can see that in especially recent years, the Gulf countries relying deeply on China on the economic development and also technology cooperation with China, and still rely on the United States in the security issues. So China will be the promoter of peace and also the contributor of development for the Gulf countries.
Building up on your answer, and as many of our viewers know, many Gulf states are expanding economic partnerships with China while maintaining strategic ties with Washington. Now, in your opinion and in your reading, could these new sanctions force Gulf governments to choose between their two largest global partners?
I think the Gulf countries should maintain their strategic autonomy and to not to choose sides is the best strategic choice for the Gulf countries. And China also will not force any countries to choosing sides, especially with the Gulf countries. And China only want to provide a more diversified choices for the Gulf countries, and to if the any cooperation with any country is benefiting the development of these countries, China will welcome that. And also, I think these Gulf countries will also continue deepening their economic and technology cooperation with China and maintaining traditional security ties with the United States. So it's taking sides do not serve the Gulf countries' strategic autonomy.
Now, if Iranian oil exports decline significantly under the new sanctions, who stands to benefit the most in the Gulf? Could major producers such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates gain market share in Asia, particularly in China?
Of course, if there is oil export decline for Iran, so there must be the Saudi Arabia and the UAE will gain market share in Asia countries. This is for sure. But I mean, this kind of gaining market is not sustainable, and the continued the lasting for the conflicts in the Middle East will also lead or trigger to the bad or negative economic impact on the economic and trade development for the Gulf countries. So the priority now is to push all the parties to realize conciliation and begin the direct talk between the United States and Iran, and also to realize a peaceful agreement, balanced peaceful agreement on an early date to restore the stability and security in the Gulf region. This is the priority for now.
Mr. Rong, finally, I want to ask, looking beyond the immediate sanctions, do you believe this episode will accelerate China's effort to build alternative financial and trading systems that reduce dependence on the US dollar? And what would that mean for Gulf economies that increasingly trade with both Washington and Beijing?
Yes, of course, this episode will push China to explore alternative settlement system, such as renminbi, the transactions system, and but it still need time. And for Gulf countries, this presents a double choice effort effects, and it will reduce the over reliances on the dollars in one side, but also will have to change their will lead to some challenges in adjusting their current system, financial and economic system and framework. So the Gulf countries need to carefully navigate between China's and the United States financial systems.
Mr. Nader Rong, a political and economic analyst from China, I thank you so much for joining us and sharing your unique and very insightful perspective. Now, moving on, dear viewers, the United States is turning up the pressure on Iran, combining sweeping new economic sanctions with a stark warning that military action remains firmly on the table. As Washington targets key sectors of the Iranian economy, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has warned that any move against American forces could trigger a military response, raising fresh concerns over a wider confrontation in the Middle East. At the same time, diplomatic efforts are gaining momentum, with Pakistan stepping in to help ease tensions and prevent the crisis from escalating into open conflict. Before we move into our next Zoom call, here is this report.
The United States is dramatically tightening the screws on Iran, with the Trump administration warning that military forces remain an option as Washington launches what it describes as an unprecedented economic campaign against Tehran. The U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the administration was not ruling out military action, including potential strikes around Iran or in the strategic vital Strait of Hormuz.
No. If we need to use kinetic strikes, we'll use them. If Iran is foolish enough to overplay their hand or mess with the American military, we'll do what we need to do. But economic pressure, we know, hurts them the most right now. But by no means are we foreclosing using kinetic strikes anywhere in the Strait of Hormuz or around Iran.
The warning came as the United States announced sweeping new sanctions aimed at further isolating Iran and intensifying President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign. The latest measures, described by Washington as among the toughest sanctions ever imposed on Tehran, expand restriction across 5 additional sectors: aviation, digital assets, gold, shipping, and technology. According to a notice from the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, the new restrictions are designed to cut off additional sources of revenue and make it increasingly difficult for Iran to conduct business with the outside world. Iran, meanwhile, acknowledged the mounting economic pressure. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqai said Tehran was fully aware of the hardships facing the country and its businesses as the latest American measures take effect. But as economic pressure grows and military rhetoric intensifies, diplomatic efforts are also underway to prevent the crisis from spiraling further. Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir held comprehensive talks with Iranian officials in Tehran, focusing on ways to contain tensions and prevent further escalation across the region. Munir said significant progress had been made in discussions with Iran's leadership, including talks on reactivating the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding aimed at conflict resolution. The Pakistani military chief said the talks centered on regional tensions and creating a pathway toward peace through dialogue and negotiation. With Washington tightening the economic news, Tehran facing mounting pressure and regional actors pushing for diplomacy, the next phase of the confrontation may depend on which side moves first and whether diplomacy can keep a deepening crisis from turning into a wider conflict.
Ladies and gentlemen, we first had our perspective from China, and now joining us is Dr. Nabil Mikhail, professor at George Washington University in the United States. After a very warm welcome, Doctor, let's dig into the political and economic dimensions of this crisis. Now, some are asking whether Washington's economic escalation against Iran is a negotiation pressure tool for now or a long-term strategic objective. What is your comment on that?
Thank you for your kind invitation, and thanks for the good effort your channel is doing to enlighten people. It's a tough question, and frankly, my initial answer would be both. It's a long-term strategy because economic sanctions are not just an expression of displeasure. They aim really to induce negative impacts in the economy that is being punished, and it will take some time to realize their impact, but their impact really could be very painful and very harmful to the nation that the sanction has been levied against. On the other hand, it could be also a negotiations chip or card, because up till now, President Trump has not abandoned completely the choice of diplomacy. In fact, whenever he issues a warning, he also attached to it the impact of negotiations as something fruitful and helpful to the Iranians. And there was an agreement that expired after the lapse of 60 days that could actually have given Iran billions of dollars. Now they would be suffering from economic consequences that are very antagonistic to the welfare of their nation. So Trump is playing more than one game. Therefore, my short answer is that it is a negotiation tool and a long-term strategy.
Now, on the domestic front in Iran, if this economic squeeze continues in the coming days, could we see internal divisions within the Revolutionary Guard or unrest on the Iranian street?
This is a brilliant question. I should thank you for it. This morning, the media in the US carried to us the news that Iran is ready for the sanctions. In other words, they have been calculating or miscalculating what kind of sanctions will be imposed on them, and they are attempting to preempt their negative ramifications. Of course, this is an exaggeration because no country in the world would really assess completely and fairly and like say in a predictable way how it's going to be punished. There could be other developments. Therefore, I would agree with your statement, which is a very powerful sentence. Yes, I predict, I foresee, I perceive a potential serious disagreements, not only among the highest ranks of the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Iran, but among the Iranian institutions themselves. And as we can see, the role of the Supreme Guide, Mujtaba Khamenei, has been totally absent in the past and in the frequent confrontations between Iran and the United States since the overthrow of the Shah in February 1979. Always Khamenei or Rafsanjani or others positioned themselves as the people basically sending the alarm about the American dangers, the America's bad schemes against their nation. I'm not seeing anyone in Iran as a front runner to basically herald that anti-American campaign. Therefore, I tend to say that the Revolutionary Guard is the power player now in Iran, and as you said, any discord among its elites could be really a serious undermining of the system of government inside Iran.
Following the latest statements from Tehran, from the foreign ministry spokesperson, the foreign minister, and the President Pezeshkian himself, alongside Oman's renewed push to reopen the strait, is Iran really negotiating from a position of strength, as President Pezeshkian claims?
A very good question. That's a very, very good question. The answer is no. Why? Because they lost money. They would have been awarded at least an amount of money totaling 20 to 30 billion dollars had the agreement that was negotiated by Pakistan been implemented. So here there is a sizable financial loss. On the other hand, if the Supreme Guide and if the Revolutionary Guards Corps have some money, they will be spending to stymie off the negative consequences of these new sanctions. The new sanctions are not warnings. They will fill in many of the vacancies that the Obama and the Biden administrations and even Trump in his first term have or had left untouched. They're closing more on Iran. They're inching in toward the deep roots of the Iranian economy. Therefore, here, that is something will be called the least powerful position for the Iranians as they talk to the Americans through intermediaries like Qatar, Pakistan, and the Sultanate of Oman. Also, the United States has a lot of troops inside the Gulf area. Yes, Trump had to listen to their concern about their long stay, the long-term deployment, and there was a lot of mental pressure and psychological problems for them. But still, the military option has not been canceled. America could hit Iran, and it's more powerful. Trump said, and actually I did listen to him because I was present at that meeting. It was just an audience, a member of the audience. He only said that 2/3 of the Iranian Navy have sunk. Therefore, Iran does not negotiate from a position of strength. And here comes the vital role of the Arab Gulf nations. I listened to Robert Kagan from the Atlantic magazine, a writer there, and he said that the Arab nations of the Gulf must concede to the power of Iran. The opposite will happen. Iran will make many concessions to the ascending and the already powerful Arab nations of the Gulf because their militaries are better and their economies are doing well.
Now, on the military side, why has Washington stepped back from military force in favor of economic strangulation instead?
Good question. For a bevy of factors, among them the incoming legislative election, whereby Trump does not like to appear before the American public as a warmonger, and if he sidesteps the military choices at this moment or for a while, he will not appear as a warmonger. And this could resonate very well with the American public. Second, he listens and he reads a lot of reports, and they are telling them that there is a utility in toughening the sanctions against Iran. Of course, America has many spies inside Iran. I mean, we don't have to be naive because they tell him really the Iranians are suffering. So if economic sanctions are implemented, really the degree of anger inside Iran could escalate. Also, I think he has a coming session with the president of China. I'm trying to locate actually the meeting's designation under what title. So he still has a chance to talk to the Chinese, who are the biggest consumer of Iranian oil, about different options. So if he goes and meets Xi again, as he did in May of this year, and he extracted for him very lucrative economic deals, like China agreeing to buy, say, 750 Boeing airplanes to staff their civilian aviation system. If he goes to China, or if he meets again with the president of China, and he is basically brandishing military slogans and is supervising military operations, his chances of reaching an agreement with China on so many things, including Iran, could be very well diminished. So it is a smart diplomacy. And again, to link all these great questions together, the United States is in a much favorable position than Iran as the confrontation goes on.
You name it a smart diplomacy, and Vice President Vance recently described the economic pressure as America's most effective tool against Iran, but also called it a delicate dance. What does that kind of language tell us about the internal debate over strategy inside the administration?
A good question, but this is typical of any American effort to reach out to outside players. It has been played in the Arab-Israeli conflict, how to balance interests between the Arabs and the Israelis, considering that Israel has a very, very powerful lobby in the United States, and even, like say, before, the lobby was even stronger. Now we have many Arabs, Muslims, critics of Israel. So any administration, whether Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, must go for some degree of equilibrium, whether with Iran, with the Arab-Israeli conflict, with the communists during the Cold War, with the Soviets as a supreme nuclear power. So no, actually, I do not see any novelty or anything new in what J.D. Vance said. It's basically distributing the roles. Vance will say something, then Rubio will say something, then Hicks will say something, and ultimately Trump will be orchestrating all these different opinions. So it's not really a serious division. It has been employed through many phases and versus many issues, and the Arab-Israeli conflict is a big illustration of that quote-unquote semi or contained discord.
Now, turning to the tools Washington is using, what are the main economic financial instruments the U.S. is deploying to tighten the noose on Iran?
I believe the biggest tool would be at least two things. Stopping smuggling to Iran from the borders. Iran borders 7 nations: Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So if there is better monitoring for the borders, many Iranians could be deprived of commodities that they need and that which they used to get through or across the borders of their nations from other country neighboring to them. A friend of mine from Iran, he's an Iranian American, told me that since the crisis started, many Iranians have left Tehran and big cities to live in the countryside because the cost of living is much cheaper. They will avoid potential raids, and food and housing will be accessible somehow to them. So stopping the black market could be devastating to the Iranians, because actually the economy in Iran relies heavily on black market, and that is encouraged and tolerated by the authorities because Iran cannot produce enough goods on its own to feed its population and cover all of their needs. Secondly, and lastly, I think if really many financial transactions are obstructed, that could deprive Iran from a vital source of currency and hard currency in general.
So in terms of impact, which sectors of Iran's economy would you say are being hit hardest right now?
I think the oil economy for sure, because Iran is losing every day a sizable amount of money since they cannot export their oil. It seems that China now, their biggest consumer, have enough oil, and there's an American-Iranian detente. If China needs oil, perhaps they will pressure America to ease out the sanctions a little bit. So that can be an indication that one sector of the Iranian economy is being improved because they will be selling their products. But so far and up till now, if Iran is not selling its oil, there is no income. That's a loss. It is that simple. It is that big.
Now, beyond Iran itself, how are these sanctions affecting the countries that still trade with Tehran, namely China, Russia, and North Korea?
I would not really consider Russia dependent on Iran. Uh, Russia is a big country. It's a very advanced industrial country. It is in a war with Ukraine. So I do not think that really the geopolitical choice for Moscow is to look at the Gulf. They are looking more at the Europeans because if, for instance, the oil and energy markets that were scuttled as a result of sanctions against Russia were removed, Russia could export again oil and gas to so many European countries, especially in East Europe and in the Balkans. So Russia is not really too much dependent or concerned about the Iranians. North Korea is too isolated, and actually Trump now is trying to approach North Korea to strike a deal. So I do not think really there will be a shaker and a major player in the crisis now in the Gulf. So things will be focusing on China. It depends really on how will the Chinese define their strategic options in the Gulf. So far they have been quiet. In fact, I think even India is hurt more because India imports a lot of oil from the Gulf, and that oil is not reaching them in enough quantities and too late. If there is a Chinese Indian demand or consensus to ask America to lower the tension and do not level it up with the Iranians, that could be really a signal of an important strategic development, favorable or good for Iran. But so far that has not happened. So I think the Chinese will ask Trump to ease out the sanctions, but they will not be too supportive of the Iranians, feeling also that their quarantine of the ships in the Gulf has done a great deal of damage to their economies.
Now, Dr. Nabil, the 60-day negotiating window between Washington and Tehran expired on August 17th with no deal in sight, and President Trump says no talks are currently scheduled. Has the diplomatic window effectively closed, at least for now?
It closed, but it has not been discredited because Qatar, Oman, and Pakistan are still offering their good offices for negotiations. And I think negotiations are going on. I mean, like say 2 weeks ago or something like that, there was an admission that the United States government, the Trump administration, contacted members of the Revolutionary Guards. That was really, like say, a shock for many. They are our arch enemies, and then we're talking to them. Therefore, the door of diplomacy has not closed finally. So negotiations are still going on, but they are not moving. They are not moving really anything. Therefore, let us just wait and see. And I believe that Trump will try to make quick announcement that the sanctions are really hurting the Iranian people and the Iranian economy.
As we wait and see, Dr. Nabil, I thank you for your valuable insight.
Thank you, and thank you very much for these excellent questions. And I really did enjoy the interview.
Dear viewers, as the standoff drags on, let's take a closer look at where diplomacy stands and the regional efforts trying to keep it alive.
The United States is preparing to unveil what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described as the single greatest financial offensive ever against Iran on Monday, as Tehran warned that it could seize vessels that violate its transit rules in the Strait of Hormuz. The looming escalation comes after Washington and Tehran failed to reach a deal within a 60-day ceasefire window, effectively closing the formal mechanism aimed at ending the Middle East war, now in its 6th month. In a post on X on Sunday, Bessent said that at dawn begins an economic D-Day, describing the forthcoming measures as the endgame of Washington's campaign to pressure Tehran. The new measures are expected to build an extensive sanction regime already targeting Iran's banking, energy, aviation, and cryptocurrency sectors. The Trump administration has argued that the sanctions campaign has pushed Iran's economy into freefall, fueling runaway inflation and weakening the country's currency. Bassett also warned that any nation that serves as a financial artery of a withering regime should expect to share in its isolation, signaling that foreign governments and entities that continue to conduct business with Tehran could also face penalties. He has previously warned of additional secondary sanctions against countries and companies that maintain economic ties with Iran. Tehran, meanwhile, has responded by warning other nations against cooperating with U.S. economic measures while tightening its grip on the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global energy checkpoint through which roughly one-fifth of the world's seaborne oil passed before the war. On Sunday, Iran went further, threatening to halt oil exports through the strait or even the wider Persian Gulf region if Washington proceeds with what Tehran describes as economic war. Against this backdrop, diplomatic efforts are also continuing. Omani Foreign Minister Sayyid Badr al-Busaidi is scheduled to visit Tehran on Tuesday for bilateral talks with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi, according to local media reports. The discussions are expected to include the escalating tensions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz as diplomatic efforts continue alongside the intensifying economic and strategic confrontation.
With that, it brings us to the end of today's coverage. Before we go, here's where things stand as of this hour. The 60-day negotiating window between Washington and Tehran has expired with no deal, and no new talks are currently scheduled. President Trump continues to threaten economic D-Day against Iran, while Oman keeps working behind the scenes to revive the process, even as it faces its own pressure from Washington. On the ground, shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz remains well below normal, and global energy prices continue to feel the strain. Washington has just added new sanctions targeting the Iranian-affiliated group Hezbollah as an Iranian proxy, extending the pressure campaign beyond Iran's borders, while Tehran denounced these sanctions as economic terrorism. We will also be providing the latest updates and headline-making news in our 7 p.m. bulletin, so stay tuned for that. As for our daily broadcast, we'll be back tomorrow to continue our live coverage as the story develops. Until then, have a blissful day.